we're not going to, preview a game, so to speak, but what are some things that you are looking for and would like to see on Saturday?
Yeah, last year it was the ones versus the twos, right? Pretty much across the board, with the exception of Apu, who was just running around playing for both teams, which was honestly, frankly, hilarious. Watching his jerseys all ripped. He's like, changing every other possession, going out playing goal line for the opposite team. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I think with this game in particular, offensively, I'm looking to see the quarterback position. I want to see Gary do what he did last year and really just cement himself as the quarterback, because basically throughout the spring, that's all we've seen and heard, is that it's not really a competition, it doesn't seem. It's Gary Bohannon. He's the guy. Well, I kind of don't want this to linger into the fall if that is the case, right? I mean, I'd rather it just get over with so we don't have to talk about it, and it can just be Gary's the quarterback. We know how good Blake Shapen is, and that's it. And just leave it at that. So I'm hopeful for that. I'm hopeful that the wide receiver position is healthy enough to go out there and contribute and make an impact and make these quarterbacks look good and actually, go out there and have some success. We'll see. They've been banged up quite a bit, but I do think most of the guys are back ready to go, whether it's Jalen Ellis or Gavin Holmes or Javon Gibson. Monterey Baldwin as well. I mean, these guys I think are going to be ready to go. And so I'm just excited to see them maybe cut it loose a little bit and go out there and really put on a display and show everyone the talent they do have in that room. Josh Cameron's another guy who's definitely on that list as well, and Seth Jones. So that's exciting. I think all these skill positions we're just going to be kind of staring at, right? Because running back as well, when you look at guys like Tay McWilliams, is he going to take over the role? Is this his time? Josh Fleeks, is he going to give us an Abram Smith moment from last year where we came out of the spring game and went, man, Abram Smith is an absolute necessity for this offense? Is there going to be a running back that steps into that? Could it be Jordan Jenkins? Could it be Squirrel? Does Squirrel come out and have a great performance? We just don't know, but I do think that there is a very high likelihood we kind of get that answer on Saturday, because we got the answer last year with Abram Smith.
Yeah, quite possibly. I feel like it's not going to be a one-man show, so to speak, so I know it wasn't last year either, but Tay McWilliams looks good. That's great, but really need to see like 3 or 4 guys, I think, quite honestly, look pretty good ultimately. I don't know. I just don't think they're going to be able to do the whole Smith-Ebner thing again. I think because those guys were so experienced and so had so many skins on the wall. Like, even if you bring, even if Tay McWilliams is pretty good, and then let's say, I don't know, like Jordan Jenkins or something, I still feel like it's, we're going to see Squirrel. We're going to see probably 1 or 2 other guys, but how many snaps are given out and divided and all that throughout the year? I mean, we'll see on Saturday kind of what the mindset is right now. So I'm sure it'll be a lot of Tay McWilliams, and then some glances at other guys as well, which I'm looking forward to seeing. I mean, we haven't seen Jordan Jenkins carrying the football very much, and if you've been at practice, not at all. So, the running backs group should be fun to see. And, with those receivers, you said a lot of names, but I think I counted like 2 catches total between that entire group that you just mentioned. That's what's wild is I don't know that we'll have the answer at receiver. Like, I don't think that they're out there scouring for running backs necessarily. I do feel like they probably are for wide receivers, though, and even if it looks pretty good on Saturday or whatever it ends up looking like, I still feel like, or do you feel like as well, that's still going to be a position they're eyeing, even if we saw, guys just going off on Saturday?
Yeah, because, Hal Presley's still hurt, so you can't really count on him, unfortunately. I think he's going to be fine for the fall, everything I've heard, but, you still don't want to go into the season with your number 1 guy coming right off of an injury. That's a tough place to be in. And so, I kind of agree with you, because over the course of the spring, I honestly feel like Josh Cameron has probably been their best receiver, which is, I like Josh Cameron. I think he's worthy of a scholarship, no doubt. He is a scholarship guy, but I don't know that he can be your number 1 wide receiver. I think he can be a very good complementary piece. He's a very good blocker, which is something that this offense desperately needs. But I don't know that he can be your true alpha out there. So it's like him and Armani Winfield, who's a true freshman, have been, in my mind, based on what I've heard, their best receivers so far this spring. And so that's an issue. And so I think I'm hoping on Saturday we see guys like, the guys that we thought, Monterey Baldwin, Jalen Ellis, really come out and thrive. Gavin Holmes, show that he's healthy. I'm hopeful for that because if you get that veteran leadership in the room and you start seeing those guys be productive, maybe I start to feel a little bit better about the room.
Yeah, I mean, so at quarterback, I mean, it'd be good just to see these guys because, see them out there like actually running plays and whatnot. We see them in drills and all that. But, seeing Bohannon and Chapin duel a little bit, and then whatever drones and company throw out there as well will be good. Running backs, I mean, we'll kind of get an idea of, who's getting the most carries. It would be Tay McWilliams and then who. Receivers, obviously, we just talked about young guys. We'll see how that goes. Tight end room, I think, looks pretty solid. I'm sure we'll see plenty of throws to Sims and Dabney on Saturday, if not some, young guys as well. Maybe Kelsey Johnson will get a pass or something like that. O-line, I think everybody feels pretty confident in that. Only replacing one starter up front. So that's kind of the deal with the offense. I am intrigued to see the kickers and just, kind of what that looks like, who they trot out there and kind of is everybody, are 5 guys getting opportunities to kick? Is it just a couple guys, is it kind of clear who the front runner is? I guess we'll have a better idea of that as well because we really haven't seen any special teams either.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to see a lot of that. We've gotten to see more of the return game a little bit, some of the guys who could be candidates there. So that's intriguing. I think seeing who's going to get the start at left guard is going to be very intriguing for me because Mose Jeffrey has gotten a lot of run there throughout the spring practices. So I'm curious if he's just come in and just played really well and ends up getting the job. I still think it's going to be Micah Mascua. I just think the talent and overall just his makeup just seems perfect for what they're trying to do on the offensive line. But if he hasn't put together, who knows? Maybe Mose Jeffrey sneaks in there and earns a starting role for this offense. That's going to be another intriguing part of the puzzle, I think, as well, as they try to just fill that one extra position that they need to fill.
Yeah, that will be cool to see. And Mazuka is the proper pronunciation for anybody who reads Mazzccua. It's Mascute, and that's Mazuka like bazooka. So maybe that'll become a nickname. Micah the Bazooka Mazuka will be his nickname or something like that. But just I wanted to clarify that for anybody, if you're like, who's that dude? And that, go ahead and put you on the right path as far as repeating his name because I know how that can get confusing and lost in translation. But he has been a name that you've been talking about for a while, and yet there is Mose Jeffrey, who's been kind of the guy that we've heard about more often. So that is interesting. And I know Mazuka's also had injuries from time to time and things like that as well. But, Mose kind of emerging is certainly one of the more interesting, not that we've had a bunch of opportunities to talk about it, but that has been one of the more, eyebrow raising kind of things for me throughout spring. It's just like, oh, okay, all right, that's not exactly what I expected there. So good for Mose Jeffrey. And, hopefully that good competition leads to them having a rock solid guard that can just come in there and be that fifth starter. So yeah, O-line wise, there's definitely that position to watch. Quarterbacks, obviously, we'll take all of that in, although it does seem like Gary's got a big lead. Tay McWilliams and then who at running back, and wide receiver, who, and is anybody ready to play wide receiver? Tight ends, again, feel good about those guys. So that's kind of the offense. Special teams, again, we'll just get to kind of see the order of the kickers and how their legs look, and punter and, all that jazz. We'll get to see that on Saturday. Whereas in practices, it's just kind of off to the side typically, although field goals are sort of a warm-up for them sometimes, but kind of fast-paced. Rush him out there, guy makes his kick, he gets off, other guy runs up, makes his kick, that kind of a deal. So we'll see it a little bit more like a game setting, I would imagine. So then defensively, I'm looking forward to seeing Jackson Player out there. Have not seen him, outside of practice, obviously, in a Baylor uniform. Haven't seen him in a Baylor uniform, really. So we'll get to see that on Saturday. And, Apu Ika, saw where he was making his way back. He was on Twitter talking about, he was just being silly on Twitter, basically, about schoolwork and stuff. And he really was being silly. But, obviously, he and Jackson Player are quite the 1-2 combo at nose. So it'll be cool to see Player in that mix. And just that whole D-line's back. So that should, you would think, be, something that looks pretty strong just by default on Saturday. But then again, they're going up against a good O-line, so that trench battle should be should be well, I'm sure it's been quite the story in spring ball, just for those there every day, seeing those two sides go at it. But we'll get a glimpse of that on Saturday.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good unit, and you kind of look up and down the depth chart there, and I mean, they're too deep and they're loaded up front. And I think over the spring, you know, you've really seen guys like TJ Franklin and Gabe Hall, I think, take another step forward. And I know everyone has big expectations for those guys, but I really do think that they're going to meet those expectations this year. Both have a ton of potential. And I think this is the year they put it all together. So I'm excited to see them and kind of see the improvements they've made because Dave Aranda has been, you know, very truthful about the fact that he needs his guys to create more of a pass rush on the defensive line. And he wants to be able to, you know, just kind of sit back in his defense and go, hey, we feel really good that we're going to get a pass rush from our defensive linemen, especially with the addition of Jackson players. So that's an exciting, I think, group. We know the talent that's there, and I think they're going to be really, really good this year. We'll see how they do on Saturday, but I'm very confident in kind of what they've built up front on the defensive line. At linebacker, you know what you're getting from Dylan Doyle, but what are you getting from everybody else? Who's going to play Will with Josh White out? Is it going to be Will Williams? You know, are you going to get to see Tyrone Brown, who had an interception last spring game? Is he going to get a chance to play some Mike? You know, with if Dylan Doyle is out or whenever he comes in to get his reps, you know, who's going to play that position? At Jack, is Garmin Randolph going to play in the spring game? If not, is it just going to be a bunch of young guys? Because I don't think Matt Jones is going to play, at least from what I've seen this spring. He hasn't been out there, and he's been dealing with an injury. Garmin dealing with an injury. So you're going to sit there and go, okay, Jackie Marshall let loose. You know, Anthony Nyanwu let loose a little bit, and I'm intrigued by that. Intrigued by seeing that depth that I know Caleb Collins has built, but kind of just seeing those guys get an opportunity potentially to go out there and possibly have a starting role in the spring game, depending on the status of Garmin Randolph and Matt Jones. That'll be fun to watch as well. So linebacker, I got a lot of question marks there, just kind of next to Dylan Doyle. You know, who are going to be the other guys playing those positions?
And I guess based on what you said last week, we got to wait all the way to media days to ask Dave Aranda about Josh White, which is kind of ridiculous, but those are the rules, I suppose. Corner, obviously got two kind of, you know, just by default starters, basically. Al Walcott, who I think it's not really by default, but Mark Milton, I mean, that's kind of by default, honestly. I mean, it really is. You know, Walcott's a returning starter. I know Milton's dabbled and dibbled and all of that, and he's played a bunch, but I mean, really, when you looked at, okay, who's coming back? It was Al Walcott, and you're like, okay, there's one starter. And then I guess it's Mark Milton because he's got the most experience, and that's kind of the way it's seemingly played out. I mean, we haven't been privy to everything. We know they've got some good young corners they like, but it will be nice to see some of these younger defensive backs because we haven't seen a ton of them. I mean, we've seen a splash of Devin Neal. We've seen, you know, splashes of like A.J. McCarty, but that was even mostly special teams. So it's like we know the names and we've seen some of them, but, you know, they were so veteran-laden that we never really saw a ton of the young guys. And now, you know, Christian Morgan and Al Walcott and Mark Milton, you know, for the entire secondary kind of give you three returning starters or give you two returning starters and another veteran. But besides that, I mean, there's a lot of, like, guys we've barely seen at this point. So, you know, when you start hearing them talk about cornerback and they list off, you know, 5 or so guys, and then, you know, at safety, they seem like they're, you know, building some depth. They're kind of figuring things out a little bit. I'll be curious to see kind of more of who's where and how they use them and all of that on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, so you got Christian Morgan who, you know, seems to be playing the star. I know a lot of people are playing the star right now, so it'll be interesting to see kind of where
everybody's playing everything almost.
Right.
You
yeah.
know? Like they're all learning every position possible. Even Bryson Jackson, he's learning all the linebacker positions. Yeah. You know, if you're in the secondary, you're probably learning 3 different, you know, positions.
For sure. And Morgan has played pretty much every position in his time at Baylor as far as practice goes, but it seems like star might end up being the position he locks in at, but I'm curious if he does that on Saturday, if they do put him in that role or if they put him back at the boundary. We know Devin Neal is going to be a fixture at one of those safety spots. I prefer the boundary spot for him. And then, of course, you mentioned Al Walcott and Mark Milton. But then you have those other positions, the field safety, and then that other cornerback spot where you don't feel like Mark Milton is really just it's his position to lose. You feel like there might be some young talent that could come in and push him to being more of a depth option. We'll see if that turns out to be the case, but I think it could, and that's mainly because I like the talent they have on their roster. So looking at cornerback, guys like you mentioned, A.J. McCarty, I would also say, Tevin Williams has to be in there as well. And then the freshman, Reggie Bush, has really turned some heads as well. I think he's going to be a fantastic player, and I think he's going to get on the field sooner rather than later, maybe even this year as a true freshman. So we'll see kind of how that ends up. I'm very excited about the cornerback group as far as their young talent they have there. At safety, it's really a bunch of guys for one position. At least that's the thought. The field safety spot, I think Devin Lemire has become the guy. I think he's kind of really asserted himself, and he's going to have to put it all together in the spring game. But if he does, I think he's got a good shot at kind of taking over that position. Guys like Cisco Castan, Devin Bobby, Mike Harris. I mean, they got a lot of options, but it just seems like Devin Lemire has really done a nice job this spring, kind of putting himself in a position to win that role at the safety spot. And that's really intriguing to me because they're trying to replace JT Woods back there, that's not easy. That's definitely not easy to do. And then they also, I got to mention Lorando Johnson, who's, again, probably playing the star, but he's a guy who's played a lot, and they're going to have to figure out ways to get creative with him to get him on the field because he was really good at times last year.
Yeah, he was. So there's kind of the lay of the land, and, no need to break down matchups and things like that, but that's just kind of a mini preview, and, some of that may be all just stuff you already know, but that's what it is right now. That's kind of where they are at every position, and, some of what we'll be looking for, but a lot of starting spots have been, pretty much determined, but there are, big questions: wide receiver, running back, cornerback depth, safety depth, linebackers, so there's a lot. Left guard, as you mentioned. So there's a lot to be looking for on Saturday, even though there might seem like there's a lot of questions that have already been answered. And, of course, there will be a bunch of recruits out there. I'm sure there will be a nice little crowd in attendance.